The 7th of May this year, I put on the only good suit I own, a dark navy one. It took me 6 months to buy it piece by piece, saving $20 here and $20 there from my Social Security checks. You know, friends, when you're 68 and have worn nothing but work clothes your entire life, a suit like that feels like a knight's armor. I took a bus for 2 hours from my place in Atlanta, Georgia, up to the city for the graduation ceremony of my only son, Marcus. He was graduating as a cardiothoracic surgeon. In my pocket, I carried the tickets. I'd bought 2 seats so I could place a bouquet of white roses next to me for him, the same kind I used to decorate his mother Rose's grave every year on Memorial Day. The Medical Academy impressed me with its grandeur. Marble columns, crystal chandeliers, like one of those old palaces I'd only ever seen on television. I took a seat in the back row, hoping not to embarrass Marcus among his colleagues in their expensive tailored suits. My heart pounded with pride. My son, the son of Elijah Thacker, the mason, was becoming a heart surgeon. I'd laid brick after brick for 40 years for this moment. Listen up. If you're hearing this, let me tell you who I am. My name is Elijah Thacker. I'm 68 years old, and for 4 decades, I worked construction in Atlanta. My hands are permanently marked by cement and lime. My back is permanently bent from carrying heavy sacks of materials. But I always had one dream, that my boy would become a doctor. That dream became my only reason for living after I lost my Rose when Marcus was just 1 year old. But what happened at that ceremony? My God, if they had ripped my heart out with their bare hands, it would have hurt less. When Marcus was called up as the top graduate, I rose to my feet, ready to applaud. He walked to the microphone, so elegant in his white coat, and began, "I want to thank the man who made me a man." I felt the tears well up. Finally, he would speak of his old father in front of all these important people. But his next words were a knife through my heart. To my father-in-law, Mr. Edwin Lowell. He taught me to see opportunity, to think big, to never be limited by my humble origins. Marcus stepped off the stage and embraced a fancy, silver-haired man in the front row. The cameras flashed, everyone applauded, and then my son turned toward the hall, pointed his hand right at where I was sitting, and said the words I will remember until my last breath. And there sits the man who gave me life, but couldn't give me anything else. I'm grateful that he at least didn't prevent me from becoming who I am, but his time has passed. In that single second, something inside me shattered. Not just my heart, my entire life. All its meaning, all those sleepless nights working 2 jobs at once. Do you know what it feels like when the one son you sacrificed everything for denies you in front of over 200 people? It's like dying and still breathing at the same time. I stood there in that last row, feeling the weight of 40 years of labor crash down on me. I remembered those early mornings when I left the house at 5 a.m. to get to the site. How my hands bled those first few years until they hardened like stone. I remembered all the times I only ate cornbread and water so Marcus could have meat. I remembered selling my grandparents 7.5 acres of land in rural Georgia, the only thing my own father had left me, to pay for his university tuition. And this man in the expensive suit, my son, pointed at me as if I were some annoying stranger who had crashed his party uninvited. The hall continued to applaud. The lights shone brightly. It was all celebration. But I felt like I was at a funeral, the funeral of all my dreams. I turned to leave. I didn't have the strength to stay another minute in that place. 2. The truth. But then Keisha, Marcus's wife, walked to the microphone. She was pale as a sheet. Her hands were shaking. The hall fell silent. "Wait, Mr. Thacker?" she said, and her voice echoed through the entire auditorium. "Everyone needs to know the truth." I don't know what power kept me standing there. Maybe curiosity, maybe the faint hope that someone would finally say something good about me. Keisha took a deep breath and continued. "I want you all to know that the man you are pointing at, Mr. Elijah Thacker, sold his parents' home last year to pay for Marcus's last semester of specialization. $250,000. A murmur swept through the hall. Marcus looked confused. Mr. Lowell frowned, but Keisha wasn't finished. "And 8 months ago," she continued, her voice growing firmer, "Marcus forged his father's signature on his retirement fund documents to withdraw all of Mr. Thacker's life savings, $180,000, which he used for the down payment on his private clinic office." The silence that followed was deathly. I myself was speechless. $180,000, my life savings. I felt my legs give out. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thacker," Keisha continued, tears now in her eyes. "I couldn't stay silent while you were humiliated like this. I found the documents in Marcus's safe 3 months ago and haven't been able to sleep since." Marcus rushed toward his wife, ripping the microphone away. But the damage was done. The entire hall looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, pity mixed with respect. Mr. Lowell turned red with rage. Photographers began snapping pictures like crazy. I was still standing in the back row, processing what I had just heard. Forging my signature, stealing my savings. I had saved that money, dollar by dollar, for 40 years, working double shifts, denying myself even a soda on Sundays. It was for my old age, so I wouldn't be a burden to anyone. Marcus came running toward me, but I had already started walking toward the exit. "Dad, wait," he shouted. But I didn't stop. I couldn't look him in the eye. I had raised a thief, a liar, a man capable of stealing from his own father. I left that medical academy like a zombie and got on the bus back to Atlanta, my bouquet of white roses still in my hands. I cried for the first time in years, not out of sadness, but from a profound rage that burned inside me. 40 years laying cement, 40 years of sacrifice, 40 years believing I was building my son's future, and it turned out I had raised a stranger. Out of 3, the vow that night, in my little kitchen, I put the roses in a glass of water and stared at them until dawn. Those flowers were the only pure thing left from that horrible day. And that's when I decided that this couldn't be left alone. You know, in moments like that, time stops, and your whole life flashes before your eyes. I remembered that day, 32 years ago, when I held newborn Marcus in my arms at the hospital. Rose was dying from complications after childbirth. I made her a promise, whispering in her cooling ear, "Our boy will be a doctor. He'll save other mothers." She smiled and closed her eyes forever. From that day on, my entire life was devoted to a single goal. Marcus had to study, not work like I had at his age. I remember sitting with him and his textbooks at 2 a.m. after my construction shift. I, an illiterate construction worker, helping my son with math, learning it all over again from his books. My hands, cracked by cement and lime, carefully turned the pages of his notebooks so I wouldn't dirty them. Do you know what it's like to come home after 8 hours of hauling bricks under the Georgia sun and sit down to study division of fractions? I couldn't even read properly when Marcus started elementary school. But I managed. I bought the same books he did, studying them at night while he slept. My thick, calloused fingers struggled to hold the pencil, but I learned because my son needed help with homework, and I was all he had. I remember that December night in 1992 when Marcus was 6 years old. He came home from school, crying because the other kids made fun of him. They say I'm poor, Dad, that I don't have a mom, that you can't read. I sat him on my lap right there in our kitchen, which was also our living room and dining room. I told him, "Son, being poor isn't a shame if you work honestly. And about reading, look." I showed him how I had learned to write his name in big clumsy letters on a piece of paper. I did it for you. Everything I learn is for you. When Marcus turned 18, he got into medical school. The tuition cost $80,000, a sum someone like me could earn in 10 years. But I didn't hesitate for a second. I sold the 7.5 acres in Georgia, the only thing my father had left me. That land had fed our family for 100 years. My ancestors are buried there. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, tried to discourage me. "Elijah, think about it. It's family land." But I replied, "My son's education is more important than the land of my ancestors." Those 6 years of university were the hardest of my life. I worked as a mason from 6 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, and from 4 in the afternoon until midnight as a night watchman at the metalworks factory. I slept 4 hours a day, ate once a day, cornbread with salt, and sometimes beans to save for every dollar for Marcus. And he ate meat every day, wore good clothes, and bought expensive medical books. I remember those early mornings at the factory, making my rounds through the empty aisles with my lamp. The silence was so profound you could hear my own breathing, and I would think of Marcus, sleeping warm in his bed, maybe dreaming about the day he'd be a doctor. I thought of Rose, who would be proud to see how our son was studying instead of working from sunup to sundown like his father. My buddies on the construction site told me I was crazy. "Elijah, your son is going to study, and then he's going to forget about you. You should put him to work." But I had faith. I watched Marcus come home from university with bright eyes, telling me about anatomy, about heart disease, about how doctors saved lives. "One day I'm going to operate on hearts, like Mom's dad. I'm going to save other kids' mothers." Now, some nights, Marcus would find me asleep on top of his textbooks. I tried to understand what he was studying so I could help him. I bought medical dictionaries at the used book flea market. I spent my Sundays trying to decipher words that sounded like another language. Coronary artery, left ventricle, bypass surgery. I repeated those words while mixing cement on the job site, as if they were prayers. I remember the day Marcus told me he had passed all his first-year exams with the best grades. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was fixing a leak in the roof of our house. He came running, shaking a paper. "Dad, look, I'm second in my class." He climbed the ladder to hug me, and we almost fell off together. That night, we ate barbecue. It was the first time in months I allowed myself that luxury. Marcus's professors sometimes knew me by sight when I went to parent-teacher conferences. I'd arrive straight from the construction site, my clothes dusty, my boots muddy. I'd sit in the back, trying not to draw attention among the parents in suits and new cars. But when they talked about Marcus, when they said, "Thacker is an exceptional student," my chest would swell with pride. That was my son, the son of Elijah Thacker, the mason. I remember that December in 2019, when Marcus came home with the news about specializing in cardiothoracic surgery. It had been his dream since childhood, to heal hearts like his mother's. The specialization cost another $40,000. I didn't have it. So I went to the bank and took out a loan at 30% annual interest, putting our apartment, the only home we owned, up as collateral. The bank manager, a young man in an expensive tie, explained the risks. "Mr. Thacker, if you can't pay, you will lose your house." I replied, "Young man, my son is going to be the best heart surgeon in America. It's worth the risk." I signed those papers without trembling, even though I knew that if anything went wrong, we would end up on the street. During those specialization years, Marcus came home less often. He said he had too much to study, too many surgeries to observe. I understood, or so I thought. I kept sending him money every week, $200 for his expenses, another $50 for his books, whatever he needed. I ate once a day, so I could send him that amount. And last year, when Marcus married Keisha and they needed the down payment for his private office, I sold my parents' house in the heart of Atlanta, the very one where I was born and raised. $250,000. The real estate agent, a kid in a flashy suit, offered me a low price, but I didn't have time to haggle. My son was waiting. That house was 100 years old. My great-grandfather raised 10 children there. My grandfather had set up his carpentry workshop there. My father taught me to use tools there. In the backyard, Rose and I had our first kiss, under the same guava tree my great-grandmother planted. But all of that was just memories. Marcus's future was more important than the Thacker past. When I signed the deed of sale, the notary asked me if I was sure. "Mr. Thacker, this property has been in your family for generations." But I had already made my decision. My son needs this money to start his career as a surgeon. The dead don't need houses, but the living need opportunities. I never told Marcus how much that sale had cost me. Not just the money, but the pain of watching strangers come in to paint the walls where my father had placed his hands, where my mother had cooked thousands of meals, where I had dreamed of one day bringing Rose as my wife. I buried all of that in my heart so Marcus could start his new life unburdened. All those years, Marcus called me every Sunday. "Dad, how are you? Thanks for everything you do for me." I would tell him about my week in construction, the small problems with the house, how much I missed his mother. He would talk about his studies, the surgeries he had seen, his future plans. He never mentioned the money I sent, never spoke of the houses I had sold for him. It was as if it was the most natural thing in the world for his father to sacrifice everything for his education. But listen carefully. I don't regret any of it. Every dollar I spent, every hour of sleep I lost, every tear I shed thinking about Rose and wondering if I was raising our son right, I would do it all again. Because that was my responsibility as a father, to give Marcus everything I never had: education, opportunities, a better future. What I never imagined was that all those sacrifices, all that devotion, would one day be turned against me in a hall full of strangers, when my own son would point at me as if I were a hindrance to his perfect life. 4. The evidence. After that horrible ceremony, I couldn't find peace anywhere. Keisha had told me the truth about the forged retirement documents, but I needed proof. I couldn't just sit on my hands after what I'd heard. I thought of Victor Hayes, my old lawyer friend. Remember I mentioned him? The one I helped build his house for next to nothing back in 2010, when he couldn't afford to pay workers. I went to his office on Peachtree Street. When he saw me come in, dusty and with bloodshot eyes from lack of sleep, he got up from his desk and hugged me like a brother. "Elijah, what happened? You look terrible." I told him the whole story, The ceremony, Marcus's words, what Keisha had said about my stolen savings. Victor turned serious, very serious, and told me, "We're going to get to the bottom of this, partner. If your son did what you say, he's going to face the consequences." Victor turned out to be a true friend. We started gathering documents like detectives building a case. The first thing we did was go to the bank where I have held my pension account for 20 years. The teller, Ms. Carroll, knows me well because I come in every month to deposit my savings, dollar by dollar. "Mr. Thacker," she said, when I asked for my statements, "I'm glad you came in. I've been meaning to ask you about that big withdrawal you made in March." My heart quickened. "What withdrawal, Carol?" She frowned and pulled out the papers. "The one on March 18th, Mr. Thacker, $180,000, a very large amount." When I saw those documents, I felt the world crash down on me again. There was my signature, but it wasn't mine. I signed with big, uneven letters, like a countryman who learned to write late in life. But this signature was elegant, educated, perfect. The signature of someone who had studied at expensive universities. "This is not my signature, Carol," I said, my voice trembling. "I never withdrew that money." She turned pale. "Oh, Mr. Thacker." "Then we have a very serious problem here." Victor examined the papers with a magnifying glass. Literally, a magnifying glass he kept on his desk. "Elijah, this is forgery and fraud. Whoever did this can go to prison." I knew who had done it, but I needed more proof. A week later, Keisha came to see me at my apartment. She was nervous, looking over her shoulder as if someone were following her. "Mr. Thacker, I brought something you need to see." She pulled a folder full of papers from her bag. "I copied these from my father's private files. I shouldn't be doing this, but I can't stay silent anymore." We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I had helped Marcus with his homework so many nights, and reviewed those documents. What we found took my breath away. The sale of my parents' house hadn't been clean at all. It turned out it went through an agency called First Class Realty, which belonged to Mr. Lowell's younger brother. "Look, Mr. Thacker," Keisha explained, pointing at the numbers, "this document says the house was valued at $250,000. But here's another document showing the real market value was $400,000. The $150,000 difference had been split among the Lowells. My family home, where 4 generations of Thackers were born, had essentially been stolen." I was silent for a long time, staring at the papers. Keisha touched my hand. "Mr. Thacker, I didn't know about any of this until recently. When I found out, I wanted to divorce Marcus immediately, but I decided to wait until I had all the proof. But the worst was yet to come. One afternoon, Keisha asked me to watch Skylar while she went to the doctor. "It'll only be an hour, Mr. Thacker." Skylar loves spending time with her grandpa. I happily accepted. That 4-year-old girl was the only pure thing left in this whole nightmare. We were in Marcus's living room, playing with colored blocks, when I heard voices coming from the study. Marcus was on the phone, and by the tone, it sounded like an important conversation. Skylar kept playing on my lap, oblivious to what was happening, when the words came through clearly to my ears. "Edwin, we have to do something about the old man," Marcus was saying. "He knows too much after what happened at the graduation. Keisha's already talked too much, and now he's asking questions." Mr. Lowell's voice sounded metallic through the phone's speaker. "What do you suggest?" "Maybe we could find him a spot at the Sunset Pines facility," Marcus replied, with a coldness that froze my blood. "It's cheap, discreet, and he wouldn't be able to bother anyone there. We could say it's for his own good, that at his age, he needs special care." "Excellent idea, son-in-law. And we could sell his apartment." Those resources would be useful for expanding the clinics to Miami. My friends, there I was, sitting with my 4-year-old granddaughter on my lap, listening as my only son planned to dispose of me like an old piece of furniture. Skylar played with my calloused fingers and said, "Grandpa Elijah, why are you sad?" While behind the wall, 2 men who lived off my money discussed my fate. I put a finger to Skylar's lips to keep her quiet and kept listening. Marcus continued, "The Sunset Pines facility costs $300 a month. It's perfect. Far enough away so he won't bother us, but not so expensive as to draw attention." Edwin laughed. "Your father would never imagine that his own savings are going to pay to lock him up. It's almost poetic." When they hung up, I stayed there, shaking with rage. Skylar touched my face with her little hands. "Grandpa, are you sick?" I told her no, I was just cold. But inside, my blood was boiling. My own son, the boy I had carried in my arms when Rose died, was planning to put me in a nursing home to get me out of the way. The decision. I couldn't sleep that night. I told everything to Victor, and he decided we needed to investigate deeper. "Elijah, this is no longer just a family matter. If these guys are stealing pensions and planning to institutionalize the elderly to take their property, we have to stop this." Victor had contacts in different government offices, friends from university, who now worked in important positions. One of them, Mr. David, worked at the Department of Justice, DOJ. When Victor told him about the Lowell clinics, David became very interested. "We've been investigating irregularities in the private healthcare sector," David told us in his office. "If you have information on medical insurance fraud, it would help us immensely." That's how we discovered the true magnitude of the Lowell's dirty business. The First Choice Health clinics weren't just robbing individual patients. They were systematically defrauding insurance companies. They inflated bills, fabricated diagnoses, and charged for surgeries that were never performed. David showed us a folder full of complaints. "Look at these cases. An appendectomy that cost $12,000 when the normal price is $3,000. A heart surgery listed in the records, but the patient says it never happened. Fake disability certificates so people could collect disability benefits." And there, on that list of suspicious doctors, was the name of Marcus Thacker Lowell. My son was listed as the principal surgeon who signed all of those false reports. "For each signature on these fraudulent documents," David explained, "the doctor receives a bonus of $5,000. $5,000 for each false signature." I quickly calculated. If Marcus signed 4 reports a month, that was $20,000 extra. In a year, over $250,000 that didn't come from saving lives, but from lying and stealing. Victor continued to investigate Marcus's assets and found things that left me speechless. The mansion in the suburbs that cost $2 million, paid for in cash. Last year's Mercedes-Benz, $120,000, also in cash. Where could a young doctor get so much money up front? The answer lay in my own sacrifices and the money stolen from the insurance companies. Every dollar I had saved, working under the Atlanta sun, every penny from the sale of my land and family homes had served to finance this life of luxury, built on lies and theft. But there was more. We found that Edwin Lowell had bought properties in Miami and Las Vegas, using shell companies, luxury restaurants, a boutique hotel, million-dollar investments, all financed with medical insurance money and the savings of working people like me. One afternoon, reviewing documents in Victor's office, I came across a receipt that broke my heart. It was from the dealership where Marcus had bought his Mercedes. In the comments, it said, "Client states vehicle is a gift to himself for the success of his medical practice, financed with family inheritance." Family inheritance. That's what Marcus called the money I had sweated for 40 years. My labor, my sacrifices, the sale of my ancestors' land. All of that was inheritance in his mind. Something that belonged to him by right. Not something I had earned with these hands, destroyed by cement and lime. Victor put his hand on my shoulder. "Elijah, brother, what you did for your son was extraordinary. But what he did to you, that is unforgivable." He was right. It was no longer just about an ungrateful son. It was about a criminal who had built his fortune by robbing his own father and defrauding hundreds of patients. That night, in my small kitchen, I laid all the documents on the table. Fake invoices, forged signatures, properties bought with stolen money, plans to put me in a nursing home. It was all there, in black and white. My son wasn't just a bad son. He was a professional con artist who had used my fatherly love to finance his crimes. And I had to decide what to do with all that information. I spent 3 sleepless nights sitting in the kitchen of my modest apartment in the Atlanta suburbs, the same one I bought 20 years ago in Marcus's name, thinking it would be his starting capital. In front of me were all the documents, forged signatures, bank statements, letters from my son swearing love and gratitude. In one of them, dated 2020, he wrote, "Dad, I will never forget your sacrifices. You are my only hero. I promise to take care of you always." Do you know what the most painful thing is? Not the money, not the betrayal, but realizing that I raised a man I don't recognize. Where was that boy who cried when he saw me come home with broken hands? Where was that young man who promised to build me a house with a garden when he became a doctor? I remember that Sunday afternoon in 1998 when Marcus was 14 years old. I came home from work with bleeding knuckles because a block of cement had fallen on my hands. He ran to find alcohol and bandages, and while he treated me, he said, "Dad, when I'm a doctor, I'm going to heal your hands so they never hurt again." He cried as he put on the band-aids, as if my pain were his own. What happened to that boy? When did he turn into this stranger who planned to put me in a nursing home to take my apartment? On the 4th night, Keisha came with little Skylar. The girl fell asleep in my arms, and Keisha told me the whole truth. It turned out she had found out about the machinations 6 months ago when she accidentally saw documents in her husband's safe. She tried to talk to Marcus, but he replied, "The old man served his purpose. Now he just needs to stop bothering us so we can live." "Mr. Thacker," Keisha said, tears in her eyes, "you have the right to know that your money isn't just going toward our luxuries. Marcus and my dad plan to open 3 more clinics in Miami and Las Vegas. All the capital comes from your sacrifices and the money stolen from the insurance companies." I can't stay silent anymore. Keisha explained that she had tried to convince Marcus to return the money, to confess the truth to me, to search for some way to repair the damage. I told him you deserved respect, that without you, he would be nothing. But Marcus replied that the past was the past, that now they were an upper-class family and couldn't stoop to living like poor people again. That night, watching Skylar sleep on my living room sofa, I understood something fundamental. This wasn't about revenge, but about justice. Not just for me, but for all those patients defrauded by the first-choice health clinics, for the insurance companies paying extra for non-existent operations, for the honest doctors who couldn't compete with fraudsters. I remembered Ms. Helen, a 70-year-old neighbor who had gone to First Choice for back pain. They told her she needed urgent spine surgery that cost $30,000. She sold her little house in the country to pay for it. Later, we learned the operation was never necessary. Physical therapy would have cured her in 2 months. I also thought of Mr. Aurelio, the carpenter who worked with me in the 90s. His grandson was born with a heart problem, and Edwin Lowell charged them $50,000 for an experimental surgery that could have been done for free at the local children's hospital. Aurelio got into debt for life, and the child ended up having the surgery at the public hospital anyway. How many families like mine had been defrauded by these men? How many fathers had sacrificed everything to give their children the best, only to have their last savings stolen with false diagnoses and unnecessary treatments? I made the decision step by step. First, Victor and I went to the district attorney's office with the complete file on the First Choice health clinics. We had enough evidence to open a criminal investigation. In parallel, we went to the Social Security Administration, SSA, with the information about the fraud on my retirement funds. Mr. Ramirez from the fraud department at the SSA reviewed my documents very carefully. Mr. Thacker, this is a very serious case. Signature forgery to withdraw retirement funds is a federal crime, but we need you to file a formal complaint. I didn't hesitate for a second. I signed all the necessary papers that same afternoon. The most difficult part was the decision about the newspaper interview. Victor had put me in contact with Mia Brooks, a journalist from the Chicago Tribune who specialized in medical scandals. At first, I was embarrassed. What was I going to say? I was just a simple Mason in a newspaper read by doctors and lawyers. But Mia reassured me from the start. Mr. Thacker, your story is exactly what people need to know. How many fathers have sacrificed everything for their children, not knowing they are raising them to be criminals? How many families are being defrauded by unscrupulous doctors? I told her my entire story, from the sale of my ancestors' land to the conversation I overheard about institutionalizing me in the facility. Mia took notes for 3 hours, recorded my testimony, photographed all the documents, and promised to verify every piece of information before publishing anything. I'm going to talk to patients at the Lowell clinics, she told me. I'm going to consult with medical insurance experts. This story is going to help a lot of people, Mr. Thacker. You are doing something very brave. 2 weeks later, Mia called me. Mr. Thacker, I found 12 more families who were defrauded by First Choice, all with the same pattern. Exaggerated diagnoses, unnecessary surgeries, inflated bills. Your son and your father-in-law have stolen millions of dollars. 6. The Legacy. The article came out on June 23rd with the headline, Mason versus the Empire of Lies, How a Hero Dad Dismantled a Medical Mafia. There were photographs of the documents, interviews with defrauded patients, comments from medical insurance experts. Mia had done an extraordinary job. Every accusation was backed up with irrefutable proof. The reaction was immediate. Marcus called me, screaming like a madman. Dad, how could you do this to me? You ruined my career, my marriage, my life. I replied with a calm that surprised even myself. Son, I didn't ruin anything. You ruined your life the day you decided to steal from me and lie to your patients. Edwin Lowell tried to sue the newspaper for defamation, but his lawyers told him the evidence was incontestable. Furthermore, by that time, an official investigation was already underway. Authorities had frozen the clinic accounts and called all the doctors involved for questioning. The final step was changing my will. My apartment in the suburbs, the only thing I had left, I decided to bequeath to the St. Joseph's Haven Orphanage. 40 children from poor families, orphaned and abandoned, live there. May my last resources help them achieve what I wanted to give my son: a better life opportunity. I went to the orphanage to meet the children before signing the papers. The director, Sister Mary, greeted me in the courtyard where the little ones were playing. "Mr. Thacker, we read your story in the newspaper. You are an example of dignity to all of us. I saw those 40 children running, laughing, studying under the trees in the courtyard, and I understood that my real family was there. Not in the son who had betrayed me, but in these little ones who needed what I could give them: a safe roof, a chance to study, the hope of a better future." That afternoon, at the notary's office, I signed my new will. Mr. Thompson asked me if I was completely sure. "Mr. Thacker, this apartment must be worth at least $800,000. It's a very important decision." I replied, "Sir, I have made many important decisions in my life. This one gives me the most peace." When I left the office, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. For the first time since the graduation ceremony, I walked the streets of the city without that weight on my chest, without the bitterness that had accompanied me day and night. Justice was in motion. The criminals were going to pay for their crimes. My money, when I died, would serve to educate children who might value the sacrifices of those who love them. Marcus had lost his father, but 40 children were going to gain a future. For the first time in my life, I truly felt free. A year has passed since those events, and now, telling you this story, I can say justice triumphed. But the price was higher than I thought. Edwin Lowell received 8 years in prison for large-scale organized fraud. His clinics were confiscated, his accounts frozen. Marcus lost his medical license for 5 years and received 3 years of probation as an accomplice. Do you know what's surprising? When the sentence was read, I didn't feel triumph, only emptiness and fatigue. I sat in the courtroom, watching my son being led away in handcuffs. But I was thinking of that child who once kissed my injured hands and told me, "Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to heal people the way you heal them with your kindness." The judge had been very clear when reading the charges. Marcus Thacker Lowell, for forgery of documents, fraud against insurance institutions, and theft of retirement funds, is declared guilty. Every word fell like a hammer on my chest. That was my son, the boy I had held in my arms when Rose died, the young man who promised me a house with a garden when he became a successful doctor. Keisha filed for divorce immediately after the sentencing. She took Skylar and moved back in with her mother in a different state. The mansion in the suburbs was sold at public auction. The Mercedes was confiscated. Keisha now works as a nurse at a public hospital. Her salary is 10 times lower than before, but she says she sleeps peacefully for the first time in 3 years. 2 months ago, I visited her. She lives in a simple house with her mother, Ms. Helen, a 70-year-old woman who greeted me with coffee and sweet bread. "Mr. Thacker," Ms. Helen told me, "my daughter has told me everything. You did the right thing. Men like Edwin and Marcus needed someone to stop them." Keisha looked different, thinner, with some premature gray hairs, but her nieces held a peace I hadn't seen in years. "Mr. Thacker, I work 12 hours a day at the hospital, but I sleep like a baby. Before, I had nightmares thinking about all the money we spent, knowing where it came from. I still live in the same apartment. It's mine until I die. I get up at 6 in the morning, as I always have. I have coffee with toast and look out the window at the acacias in the courtyard. On Tuesdays and Fridays, I work on the construction of the St. Joseph's Haven Orphanage. I teach young men how to lay bricks correctly so the house will last 100 years. The most surprising discovery this year has been the children at the orphanage. When I first arrived with my tools, a crowd of children from 5 to 16 years old came out to meet me. They surrounded me, bombarding me with questions. "Mr. Thacker, is it true you beat the rich people? Is it true you're giving us your house?" Their eyes shone with the same light that little Marcus's eyes once had. I especially remember Carl, an 8-year-old boy with serious, adult eyes. His parents died in a car accident. He has no relatives. He approached me and said, "Mr. Thacker, when I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor, and I'm going to treat people for free, and then I'm going to build another orphanage for kids like us." In his words, there was that sincerity I had lost in my own son's voice. There are other children who have also touched my heart. There's Maria, a 10-year-old girl who was orphaned when her parents died of COVID. She wants to be a teacher and tells me, "Mr. Thacker, I'm going to teach in poor towns, so all children can learn to read." And there is Robert, 15 years old, who dreams of being an engineer to build houses that won't fall down in earthquakes. Every Sunday, I bring them corn tortillas to the orphanage. I make them myself, using my late Rose's recipe. 40 children gather in the dining room, and we eat together. They tell me about school, about their dreams, about their plans. None of them know what the betrayal of loved ones is like. They are simply grateful for every day, for every opportunity. Sister Mary, the director, told me some of the children's stories. "Mr. Thacker, Carl arrived here 2 years ago, completely traumatized. He wouldn't talk to anyone, but since you started coming, he's changed completely. He says he wants to be like you when he grows up, honest and hardworking." On Sunday afternoons, after eating, I sit in the courtyard and talk with the older kids. I tell them stories from when I was young, how I learned the mason trade, about the buildings I helped construct in Atlanta. They listen attentively, asking me questions about cement and rebar, about how to make a wall straight. "Mr. Thacker," Robert once asked me, "is it true you never went to school but taught yourself to read?" I told him how when Marcus was little, I bought the same books he had and stayed up very late trying to understand the letters. Necessity makes you wise, son. When you want to help your child, you're capable of anything. 6 months ago, I received a letter from prison. Marcus wrote, "Dad, forgive me. I understand I lost the most valuable thing, your respect and your love. The money is gone. My friends turned their backs on me. My wife left. All I have left is shame and the realization of what a monster I became. I'm not asking you to take me back into the family. I know I don't deserve it. But if there is even a drop of love for me in your heart, write me just one line." I held that letter in my hands for 3 days, but I never replied, not out of anger, but out of emptiness. The Marcus I loved died to me on the day of the graduation. And this man, writing from prison, is a stranger. Talvez one day his conscience will awaken, and he will become a worthy son. But it will no longer be my time to see it. The letter was written on cheap prison paper, in shaky handwriting. It said he had to work in the kitchen to earn a few dollars, that his cellmates made fun of him for stealing from his own father. Dad, Every night I think about all the times you came home with broken hands, and I didn't even ask you how your day went. I think about the day you sold your parents' house, and I just said thank you without understanding what it meant to you. But I couldn't answer. Words were finished between us. I put the letter in the drawer of my nightstand, along with the photos of when Marcus was a child. Sometimes I look at them at night and try to remember at what point we lost the way, at what moment love turned into self-interest, gratitude turned into arrogance. Instead, I see something different every day. Yesterday, Keisha came to visit with school Skylar. My granddaughter has grown. She's even prettier. The spitting image of Rose as a girl. She brought a drawing, a house with a big garden where many children are playing. And next to it is an old man in work clothes who is smiling. "That's you, Grandpa Elijah, in the new house for the kids," she explained. Skylar told me that at school they were asked to draw their favorite hero. I drew my Grandpa Elijah because he's the bravest of all. He beat the bad men, and now he takes care of the kids who don't have dads. Her words hit me deeper than any official recognition. When they left that afternoon, I stood looking at the drawing pinned to my refrigerator. Skylar had drawn the orphanage with bright colors, with children playing in the courtyard, with trees full of fruit. And there I was, with my mason's cap and my big hands, surrounded by little ones who were smiling. You know what? In that drawing, I saw my true future, not in the treacherous sun, not in the luxuries I never valued, but in these simple things: children's smiles, honest work, a clear conscience. That night, I smiled genuinely, for the first time in a year, and thought, "Old man Elijah, you didn't live this life in vain." The day before yesterday, we finished putting the new roof on the girls' dormitory at the orphanage. I worked side by side with 3 young men, 18 years old, who just left the orphanage but come back on weekends to help. "Mr. Thacker," one of them told me, "thanks to you I learned that honest work has its own dignity." That afternoon, as we gathered the tools, Carl came up to me and handed me a handmade card. Inside, he had written in a child's handwriting, "For Mr. Thacker, who taught us that family isn't just blood, but the one you choose with your heart." I sat on one of the courtyard benches with that card in my hands, watching 40 children play soccer before dinner. The sun was setting behind the city buildings, and I thought of Rose, how she would have loved to see this, how she would have loved to know that her Elijah, the rough mason who never quite learned to read well, had found his place in the world, caring for the little ones who needed it most. Now, every morning when I wake up, I no longer feel that weight in my chest that I carried for months. I prepare my coffee, look at the acacias in the courtyard, and I know my life has meaning, not for what I built for Marcus, which is lost forever, but for what I am building now, brick by brick, smile by smile. For these 40 children who truly know how to value love when they receive it. And when my time comes, when I go to reunite with Rose, I will be able to tell her, "My love, our son got lost on the path, but I found 40 children who do understand what it means to sacrifice for others." That will be my true legacy. Not the money Marcus stole, but the values these children will carry throughout their lives. Elijah Thacker, Mason from Atlanta, father and heart to 40 orphans. That's how I want to be remembered. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe See you in the next life story. With love and respect.